This story tells us how the desire to look cool can quietly pull someone across a line they never meant to cross, and how the price for recognition can become a prison sentence. It is the story of Ian, a teenager who only wanted to be seen, and the way it all ended is not what anyone expected. Ian was 16, one of those kids who slipped through the cracks without making noise. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't brilliant either. He was simply there, on the back row in class, in the corner at parties, at the dinner table where conversations never went deeper than, "Did you finish your homework?" His parents worked opposite shifts to keep the bills paid. They loved him, but life had worn them thin, and their son's quietness looked like normal teenage distance. They never noticed how lonely he really was. At school, everything revolved around groups, teams, cliques. You were either in or invisible. Ian hated how doors closed right in front of him, not literally but socially. Others had nicknames, inside jokes, shared memories. He had headphones and long walks home. That changed the day he met the boys behind the old mall. The ones who leaned on rusted railings like they owned the night. They had that careless swagger that only comes from believing nothing can touch you. Their jokes were loud, sharp, and confident. They didn't look through Ian. They looked at him. They called him over, offered him a soda, laughed at one of his awkward jokes. It was small, but to Ian it felt like sunlight after months of gray. He started stopping by more often. At first he only listened. The talk was about parties, fights, rumors, and eventually about night rides. They told the stories like legends, slipping into a car, rewiring the ignition, feeling the engine roar under their control. They described it as harmless, just a thrill, a little rebellion, no big consequences. Every time they spoke, Ian felt two voices inside him. One said, "This is dangerous. Walk away." The other whispered louder, "If you refuse, they'll laugh. They'll forget you. You'll go back to being nobody." So when the invitation finally came, it sounded casual, and almost like kindness. "Come along. You don't have to do anything, just watch." Ian nodded. His heart pounded, but he didn't want them to see that. He told himself it was only curiosity. Just one night. Just to prove he belonged. That evening he stared at his reflection before leaving the house. He didn't look like a criminal, just a kid who wanted friends. He had no idea that one wrong step taken for acceptance can follow you far longer than any friendship. As he walked into the darkness toward the abandoned lot, he felt something shifting. Not in the world, but inside himself. A quiet line was being crossed, and once he crossed it, there would be no simple way back. The lot behind the abandoned mall looked like a skeleton of something that once mattered. Cracked concrete, grass forcing its way through seams, broken lights humming weakly overhead, a perfect place to do something wrong and feel untouchable. The boys were already there. A black hoodie was draped over the hood of an old sedan. Someone passed around gum. Someone else tapped nervously on a phone. They acted casual, like this wasn't crime, just a late-night hangout. Ian tried to mirror their ease, but his palms were wet. Each sound, on a distant siren, a dog barking, the crunch of gravel, landed inside his chest like a hammer. He reminded himself, "I'm only watching. I won't touch anything." A car rolled into the lot, not theirs. It slowed, circled, parked. The driver left without locking it. The group exchanged glances like stage actors hearing their cue. "Easy pick," one of them whispered. Another boy, lean, confident, slid into the driver's seat with a practiced motion. Wires clicked. The engine coughed, then growled. The sound vibrated through Ian's bones. It felt unreal, like standing too close to a storm. They laughed. Not nervous laughter, but triumphant, reckless. "Hop in," someone said, swinging the rear door open. Ian hesitated. Time stretched. He imagined himself saying, "No thanks, I'm heading home." He saw their faces turning from friendly to mocking. He saw himself walking alone again, the joke of the group. The need to belong tightened around him like a hand. He climbed inside. The city flew past, empty streets, flashing traffic lights, the blur of neon signs. The boys yelled out the windows, blasted music, swerved just enough to feel the skid. To them it was freedom, power stolen for a night. To Ian it was a roller coaster with no brakes. He laughed when they laughed, but the laughter tasted like fear. Every corner felt like fate flipping a coin. "See?" the driver shouted over the music. "Nothing happens unless you're stupid." They cruised for nearly an hour, circling neighborhoods, skimming risk. Eventually they drove the car to a quiet industrial street and left it there like a discarded toy. No alarms, no police, no consequences. The boys slapped hands, shared cigarettes, told stories that were already becoming legend. Ian walked home under the thin glow of street lamps, adrenaline slowly leaking out of him. The world looked the same, but he felt different, slightly tilted. At his front door he paused, listening to the house breathe, fridge hum, pipes ticking. Safe sounds. Ordinary life. He whispered to himself as if to erase the night, just once, not again. But the next day at school everything changed. The boys nodded at him in the hallway. One of them punched his shoulder lightly, not as a threat, as acknowledgement. For the first time, Ian was part of a story people wanted to hear. And that was more dangerous than the crime itself. Because attention is addictive, and addiction always asks for more. The second time didn't feel like a decision. It felt like momentum. A message dropped into the group chat at midnight. Meet. Just one word, but loaded with meaning. Ian stared at the glowing screen in his dark room. His parents were asleep. The ticking of the wall clock echoed like footsteps in an empty hallway. He thought about ignoring it, about rolling over and letting the night swallow the invitation. Instead, his fingers typed back almost automatically. Where? He told himself he was only going to hang out. No stealing, no driving, just being there. The lot was different this time. An alley behind a mechanic's shop, tools scattered, dumpsters leaning like rusted giants. A faint smell of oil clung to the air. The boys were already laughing when he arrived, as if the evening belonged to them. "Hey, Ian!" The confident one, Mark, clapped him on the back. "Our guy shows up." Our guy. The phrase hooked into him, subtle and deep. There was no abandoned car this time. Instead, one of the boys produced a thin strip of metal and a tool kit. They worked quickly on an old station wagon parked outside the shop. Ian felt his throat tighten. "This belongs to someone," he said quietly. Mark shrugged. "Insurance pays. We're not hurting anybody." The argument slid into Ian's mind like a lie that already knew the route. No broken windows, no violence, just movement. The engine turned over. Lights flicked on. Power hummed. "Front seat tonight," Mark said, tossing him a grin. Ian froze, caught between dread and the weight of expectation. To refuse now felt impossible. The boys were watching. The story was already being written, and he didn't want to be the background character. He got in. The ride was faster, sharper. They took a highway, pushing the car far past what it was meant to handle. Wind clawed at the mirrors. The world narrowed into white lines and black asphalt and the hot rush of speed. A horn blared. A truck flashed its lights. Someone shouted, laughing harder. Ian's hand gripped the door until his fingers ached. Part of him whispered, "This is stupid." Another part whispered, "But they finally see you." They parked the car in a different neighborhood and vanished into the night like ghosts. No sirens, no flashing lights. Just silence, as if the world didn't care, and that indifference was seductive. Soon the nights became routine. A text, a meeting spot, a car, a thrill. Risk stopped feeling like danger and started feeling like pattern. Ian began to change in small, invisible ways. He slept during class. He lied effortlessly. He brushed off concern with a shrug. He practiced the look, half bored, half fearless, that the others wore like armor. At dinner, his mother studied his face. "You're different lately," she said softly. "School," he replied, stabbing at his food. "Lots of work." She hesitated, like someone staring at clouds and recognizing the shape of a storm. But she said nothing more. That night, Ian stood at his bedroom window watching the empty street. He realized something unsettling. It wasn't just the rush he craved. It was the version of himself he got to be around them. Confident, untouchable, included. He didn't know it yet, but this was the point where turning back was still easy. And like most people, he missed that moment entirely. Because the next ride wouldn't just blur through streetlights. The next one would leave wreckage behind. There are nights that drift past quietly, en automobile, and there are nights that carve themselves into you. For Ian, it began like any other. A short message, a quiet exit out the back door, and that thrilling sense that he was stepping into a world where he finally mattered. Only this time, the meeting place was farther out, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. The ground there was uneven, scattered with broken glass, and the streetlights flickered like they were unsure whether to expose what was happening or pretend darkness was kinder. "Tonight is simple," Mark said. "Pick up, drop off, disappear. No messing around." His voice carried confidence, the kind that makes you nod before you even think. Lies rarely shout. They speak in calm tones that feel safe. The car waiting for them was different, newer, sleeker, the kind people don't just own, they guard. And for the first time, something in Ian's chest tightened. He watched as Mark worked the door. He'd seen him do it dozens of times, but tonight Ian noticed a tremor in his friend's hands. "You sure about this?" Ian asked quietly. "Always," Mark smirked. But the smirk didn't reach his eyes. The door clicked open. Fresh leather filled the air. The silence inside the car was thick, almost clinical. They slid in. The engine came alive, and that was when the script changed. Mark drove faster than usual. Too fast. The road ahead narrowed into a tunnel of headlights and shadows. Someone in the back laughed, too loud, too wild. Then came the turn, sharp, sudden. Tires screamed, metal rattled, a flash of intersection lights, and a van rolled into view. Time stretched thin. Ian saw faces behind the windshield. Shock, fear, helplessness. Then impact. The world shattered. Glass exploded like ice. Metal folded like cloth. The sound wasn't just noise. It was final, brutal, absolute. Air ripped from Ian's lungs. His chest burned. Everything spun. Somewhere outside, people were screaming, not from their car, from the van. Mark cursed, fighting with his seatbelt. Ian turned, vision swimming, and stared at the wreck they'd created. The van door was crushed inward. Headlights glowed like wounded eyes. He heard a faint moan. Not imagined. Real. And suddenly the game peeled away. No swagger, no thrill, just consequences. "Out! Move!" someone shouted. They scrambled out, tripping over debris. Mark grabbed Ian's arm. "Run!" But Ian stood frozen, staring, heart pounding in his throat. He didn't see danger. He saw damage. Human, irreversible, terrifying. Mark yanked him again. "If you stay, it's over." And Ian ran, feet pounding pavement, breath tearing at his lungs. thoughts chasing him like police sirens. They cut through vacant lots and back alleys until the city swallowed them again. But something inside him refused to go quiet. That night, Ian sat on his bed, hands shaking, ears ringing with sirens that weren't there. Every distant car, every flash of light felt like police. Yet the loudest sound was the question echoing inside him. If someone in that van was hurt, what does that make me? Not unlucky, not misunderstood, responsible. The kind of responsible that courts recognize and prisons hold on to. And even though he didn't know it yet, cameras had seen them, paperwork had traced them, and the city was already connecting dots. The boys thought they got away. The law did not. For 2 days, the city pretended nothing had happened. People went to work. Buses came and went. Life kept moving, like it always does after tragedy. But Ian noticed the change, not loud, not sudden. Quiet, like footsteps behind him. The news broke first, a small headline, then a larger one. Hit and run crash injures family, police searching for suspects connected to stolen vehicle. He stared at the screen. Family, not a statistic, not a blurred image. A mother, a father, and a boy only a few years younger than him. Alive, but badly hurt. He felt something heavy lodge inside his chest. He had helped do that. Mark brushed it off when they met behind the warehouse again. Relax, no one saw anything. We ditched the car. End of story. But it wasn't bravado anymore. It was denial disguised as confidence. Another boy, Jason, wasn't so calm. They said there were cameras. He whispered like the word itself was dangerous. Mark snapped. Everywhere has cameras, doesn't mean they caught us. But the lie sounded thinner this time. Ian walked home that night with rain soaking through his clothes. He kept replaying the impact, the sound, the faces. He wanted to confess. Not to police yet, but at least to someone. His mother sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out, rubbing her temples. "Rough day?" she asked. He opened his mouth. The truth stood on the edge of his tongue like a diver ready to jump. And fear shoved it back down. Instead, he said, "Just tired." That was the first time he realized something terrible. Lies get easier the second time you tell them. The knock came 3 mornings later. Firm, professional, not frantic, worse, controlled. 2 officers stood at the door. Ian's heartbeat sprinted ahead of time. "Is Ian home?" His mother's confusion lasted only seconds, then turned into something else, a quiet, terrified politeness. The officers didn't raise their voices. They didn't accuse right away. They simply asked questions. Where was he that night? Who was he with? Had he seen this car? Photo. Had he heard about the accident? Ian tried to answer like an innocent person would. But every word felt staged, and the officer watching him was not fooled. "We'll need you to come in and talk formally," he said finally. "Your name appeared in connection with the case." His mother looked at Ian, not angry, not yet, just broken. After they left, she whispered, "Ian, what did you get yourself into?" For once, he didn't have an answer. That evening, Mark sent a message. "Say nothing. They don't have proof. We stick together. Or we all go down." And there it was. Not friendship, a pact of fear. Ian lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing that his life was no longer measured in school days and weekends. It was measured in interrogations, phone calls, and the slow ticking of consequences closing in. The next day, he walked into the police station. He noticed everything: the stale coffee smell, the hard plastic chairs, the posters about choices on the wall. Choices. The officer sat across from him, calm, patient, then slid a folder forward. Inside were still frames from traffic cameras. Blurry, but clear enough. Mark, Jason, and Ian. Just a silhouette, but unmistakable. The officer didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "Someone in that van may never walk the same again. Help us understand your part, or the court will decide for you." Ian swallowed. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, and for the first time he understood. Running was over. What came next wouldn't be decided in alleyways or warehouses. It would be decided in documents, courtrooms, and months, maybe years, taken from his life. And the question lingering wasn't just, "What did you do?" It was, "Who are you going to be now that it can't be undone?" The interrogation ended with a sentence Ian didn't fully understand at first. "You're being charged, but you'll be released pending court." Released. The word sounded merciful until he realized what it actually meant. He wasn't free. He was simply waiting for his punishment. He signed papers his hands could barely hold steady. His mother sat beside him silent, gripping her coat as if it might anchor her to the floor. Outside, rain drizzled across the pavement like the world itself wanted to wash everything clean, but couldn't. They drove home without speaking. At the kitchen table, finally, she whispered, "Tell me everything." And so he did. Piece by piece, halting and ashamed, he laid out the truth. The cars, Mark, the joyrides, the crash, the panic. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When he finished, she pressed her palms to her face and cried in a way that wasn't loud, just exhausted, as if grief had weight and it had finally found her. "I raised you to be careful," she said softly. "Not perfect, just careful." The court date was set. Weeks stretched into months. School became impossible. Eyes followed him. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps. Mark still texted, "Lawyer says we deny everything." Another message, "If one of us breaks, we all go down. Don't be stupid." But the group wasn't as solid as it pretended. Jason stopped answering messages altogether. Rumors spread. He had already talked to police. Fear shredded the illusion of loyalty faster than any interrogation. Court day came. The courthouse smelled of dust and cold stone. Time felt slower inside, like it obeyed different rules. The family injured in the crash was there, a boy on crutches. His parents pale, stiff, trying to hold themselves together. Ian couldn't look at them, and he couldn't not look either. When his name was called, his legs trembled. Charges were read, words that sounded like they belonged in movies, not next to his name. Grand theft auto, participation in criminal activity, reckless endangerment. His lawyer whispered strategy. Prosecutors spoke in precise, detached language. He realized something. Court wasn't chaos. It was a machine, cold, calculated, built to find consequences, and he was inside it. The judge listened. Witnesses spoke. Camera footage played. Mark tried to act confident on the stand, but cracks formed in his story. Then Jason spoke. Quiet, honest, terrified. He admitted everything. And although he didn't blame Ian directly, the truth tied everyone together like the same rope around different necks. When it was Ian's turn, his hands shook as he took the oath. His lawyer had told him, "Say only what we rehearsed." But when he saw the boy on crutches, something shifted. Words came out differently than planned. He didn't justify. He didn't excuse. He admitted he thought it was harmless fun. He admitted he didn't think about consequences. And most painfully, he admitted he should have stopped. Silence followed. Not judgment, not applause, just reality, settling into place. When the judge finally spoke, her voice held something unexpected. Not anger, disappointment. "You wanted to look brave," she said, "but bravery would have meant walking away." Then came the sentence. Not life, not decades, but months, and they sounded longer than years. Juvenile detention, restricted privileges, mandatory counseling. It was lighter than it could have been, but heavier than anything Ian had ever carried. The handcuffs clicked softly, almost politely, and that was the moment it became real. This wasn't a warning anymore. This was his life now. As he was led away, he glanced back at his mother. She didn't call out. She just held her hand to her heart, like something inside it had cracked and was trying desperately not to fall apart. The bus windows were caged. Ian sat with his wrists cuffed, staring through the metal lattice as the city slid past. Familiar streets turning smaller, farther, like parts of a life already fading. No one spoke. Every bump in the road jolted more than just his body. It rattled the last pieces of denial out of him. Juvenile detention didn't rise like a castle or a fortress the way movies showed. It looked ordinary. Gray buildings, chain-link fences, a yard where boys paced in circles like thoughts that couldn't escape a mind. Inside, everything echoed, and footsteps, doors, orders. A guard read rules without looking up. No fighting, no trading, lights out at 9, respect the schedule. It doesn't respect you back. He was given a uniform, a mattress, a number. The thin pillow smelled faintly of bleach and something older, resignation. His roommate, a quiet kid with freckles and tired eyes, broke the silence. First time, Ian nodded. "Don't try to impress anyone," the kid said. "That's how people get hurt." The words landed harder than any lecture. Dinner was silent except for plastic forks scraping trays. Every face seemed carved from stone. Some angry, some hollow, some pretending not to care. But the scariest ones were the boys who looked comfortable there. Routine took over. Wake up, line up, eat, school program, work duty, lights out. A life shrunk into rectangles of time. At night, voices traveled from bunk to bunk, stories about broken homes, about mistakes worse than Ian's, and some heartbreakingly smaller. A boy 2 bunks down whispered about stealing food, another about defending a little brother and swinging too hard. The realization crept in quietly. Most of them weren't monsters. They were kids who made bad choices, but kids all the same. In counseling, Ian sat across from a woman with gentle eyes and a notepad. "Why did you do it?" she asked. He tried the usual answers and pressure. "Friends, just messing around." She waited, not impatient, just expectant. Silence forced honesty out. "I liked being noticed," he said finally. "It felt good. Like I mattered." That was the first time he heard himself clearly. She didn't scold him. Instead, she said, "Needing to matter isn't wrong. Choosing the wrong way to matter is what brought you here." He carried that sentence back to his bunk like a stone in his pocket. Days blurred, then slowed. He started paying attention in the classroom sessions. Math problems steadied his thoughts. Writing assignments turned into apologies he couldn't yet say aloud. He avoided fights. He walked away when tempers flared, and discovered that took more courage than pretending he wasn't afraid. One evening during recreation, the boy on crutches from the court visited with a community program. They locked eyes. Ian expected rage. Instead, he saw something more complicated: pain, and a fragile kind of forgiveness that wasn't ready yet. "I don't hate you," the boy said quietly. "I hate what happened." The words shook Ian deeper than any threat could have. That night he couldn't sleep. He replayed every decision, every moment he'd laughed while doing something wrong, and felt the weight of what those moments had cost someone else. Not points, not popularity, real harm. And for the first time, guilt wasn't just fear of punishment. It was responsibility. He sat up, staring at the thin beam of hallway light cutting across the floor, and made a promise he didn't say out loud. When, if he got out, he wouldn't spend another day trying to impress people who wouldn't stand beside him when it mattered. He would matter, but for something better, something that didn't break anyone. Lights clicked off completely, doors locked, and in the dark, the walls didn't feel like enemies anymore. They felt like mirrors. The first breath of air outside the fence felt different, not fresher, just bigger. Ian stood with a small plastic bag of his belongings and a stack of papers explaining probation, classes, check-ins, curfews. The counselor shook his hand. "You don't have to be the person who walked in here," she said, "but who you become next. That's on you." His mother hugged him so tightly he couldn't tell which of them was shaking. There were no big speeches, only tired relief. Home felt smaller than he remembered, and quieter. The bikes his friends once leaned against his gate were gone. The group chats he used to live inside were silent. People didn't look at him the same. Some avoided eye contact, others stared too long. Consequences don't end when the doors open. Probation meetings, community service, therapy sessions. He swept parking lots, cleaned, graffiti, sat in circles with other kids and listened. Sometimes he felt judged for mistakes. Other times he realized he was judging himself harsher than anyone else. At school, the auditorium was packed for an assembly on reckless driving. A speaker limped onto the stage with crutches. Ian froze. It was the boy from the accident. The room went silent as he spoke, not angrily but honestly, about pain, surgeries, nightmares, and the split second that changed everything. Then the boy did something unexpected. He talked about choices, not villains, about how groups can turn fear into pressure, pressure into stupidity, and stupidity into tragedy. When the talk ended, Ian waited in the back hallway. His heart pounded. "Hey," he said quietly. I'm sorry, I know it doesn't fix anything." The boy looked at him, measuring the words and the person saying them. "It doesn't," he answered gently. "But it matters." It was not forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a door. And Ian felt something open inside himself too. He joined a youth program that rebuilt damaged cars for donation. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all him. Yet every bolt tightened and every scratched panel sanded felt like a small repayment to the world. Months passed. He still stumbled, still got frustrated, still wanted sometimes to be admired the easy way. But now he knew what that cost. One evening, the counselor from detention visited the shop. "I heard you're doing good work," she said with a faint smile. "Ever thought about speaking to kids like you once were?" He hesitated. He remembered the feeling of sitting in those hard seats, rolling his eyes at every adult who didn't get it. What if they don't listen? Then you talk to the one who does. The first time his voice shook, he told them the truth, not a dramatic story, just the real one. A boy who wanted to look tough, who took a ride he shouldn't have, and learned the hard way that cool isn't worth a broken body, a broken family, or a broken future. He watched faces change, not all of them, but enough. Walking home, he realized something that surprised him. He finally mattered, and it came not from danger or bravado, but from helping someone avoid the same mistake. That night, Ian looked at the stars above his street. No applause, no spotlight, just quiet. And for the first time since everything began, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The story doesn't promise that he never struggled again. No real story does. But from that day on, every decision Ian made started with a single question. Who gets hurt if I choose wrong? And that question, more than the judge, the sentence, or the walls, was what truly set him free.